One of the best pieces of advice I ever got, and I even forgot where I received it, probably from some healer somewhere along the way, that whatever you take on energetically that's new, it's generally a good practice to try to give up something that's of equal energetic value.
This is Rebel Therapist, a podcast for entrepreneurs who are trained as therapists and who want to level up their businesses, make a bigger impact, feel fulfilled, and be very well paid. I'm your host, Annie Schusler. This week, I'm talking to Jamie Marich, a therapist, author, speaker, teacher, and even more, who specializes in trauma. Listen as we talk about how she created a multifaceted business, what her daily rituals look like, and how she's made decisions to protect her energy and her vision. Welcome, Jamie. Thank you so much for being here.
My great pleasure to be here with a fellow rebel.
Yes. So you specialize in trauma, and this work has taken you into many roles, including author, speaker, teacher, therapist, Reiki healer, and there's a lot more. So I want to talk to you about that journey.
Sure.
So you started in agency work?
Well, yeah. Go ahead.
So I'm really curious how you branched out into having such a diversified company.
Sure. Well, I should probably give a shout out to the thing that got me into the field, even before agency work, because I had the good privilege of being mentored by an individual who was trauma informed before that phrase was even cool. So I actually started as an English teacher. Performing artist was my background, and I worked in humanitarian aid in Bosnia for 3 years. My family's from Croatia, so that's one of the reasons I went to that part of the world. And to make a very long story short, I went there as an English teacher, and I came back with this penchant for social work and working with trauma. And my mentor there really helped me to understand so much about how unhealed trauma can affect the human experience. And she was the one that suggested I even go to graduate school. And I really came back kicking and screaming because truly I hated psychology when I was an undergrad. And I had no idea this field would even be a fit for me. And sure enough, I began to like it because I had so much kind of in the field experience. And then I did work kind of the hospital agency set. I interned at a hospital, an adolescent mental health ward, and then I worked for a well-known drug and alcohol treatment facility around here. Then I did that for a year after grad school. Then I did the agency gig for about 2.5 years. And then it was from there that I transitioned into more of an agency private practice hybrid, and then totally into private practice with new opportunities in training and writing kind of coming as I went.
Amazing. So tell us about, we're going to go backwards a little bit again, but tell us about the components in your company now and which ones are kind of the most central, which ones are the biggest pillars.
So the full name of my company is Mindful Ohio and the Institute for Creative Mindfulness. It's a mouthful because we do a lot. So Mindful Ohio is essentially the private part of my practice with the teaching and the consulting end of what I do. And then Institute for Creative Mindfulness, that name kind of evolved from Mindful Ohio because my training company, specifically in EMDR therapy and expressive arts therapy, began to grow. And I now contract trainers and consultants and affiliates from all over the world, really. And I knew I needed a name that encompassed a little bit more of the fact that we are a training institution and not just a private practice. So.
And that it's beyond Ohio.
Right. It's beyond Ohio. Yet the funny thing is, because I know there's a business angle of the podcast, that one of the reasons I maintain the name Mindful Ohio as my private practice is a lot of people have found me by searching mindfulness in Ohio.
Sure. Yeah.
There's an interest to learn more about mindfulness meditation and then using the geographic location. So I still love that as a name. And I think it's a great name for the local work I do, because even though I am pretty international in my outreach now, I'm from a very folksy part of the country, and I'm still very proud to be based here and see clients here. And so I keep that part of the business and the name to honor that.
Mm-hmm. And how do things break down in terms of, like, not that I'm asking you specific numbers, but how do things break down in terms of how much time you're spending on different parts of your business? And then also even like about how much of the percentage of income comes from different parts of your company?
Well, it's a great question, which I'm happy to answer freely, that I have far and away found what is more financially feasible, at least for me, or financially viable, is training. And that was something I very much stumbled into, because my whole intention when I set out in this work was to have a private practice. And I would say right now, kind of 15 years into the field, where the breakdown is most of my time is spent teaching, doing training, doing writing. Yet part of my feeling is, to maintain quality as a teacher and a writer, I can't lose my private practice altogether. Is I think something that grates on my soul is when I hear trainers or teachers who are so out of the loop clinically. And so it used to be more of, it's like it started at the beginning of all this, more practice. And then gradually teaching came in more and more till it was about a 50-50 balance. And then the writing thread became more prominent. So it was kind of like a third balance. And now I would say teaching and writing definitely predominates. I've probably scaled back with consultation, because I do want my energy working one-on-one with people to still be doing clinical work. Because in the EMDR training model, there is a consultation component. In the expressive arts training model, there's a supervision or consultation component. And I've done a lot of that work over the years. But the reality is I have so many people on my team now who can do that I would rather spend my one-on-one energy doing clinical work. Because for me, it's just such an important part of what makes me a good teacher.
Beautiful. Okay. So you've had to really decide since you can't do everything, and since there are only so many hours in your work week, which ones have to stay and which ones, even though you'd like to do them?
And it's a great question, because myself and my support system, we've had big conversations about this, even in recent years, because where I'm at an advantage, and I know that I'm in a position of privileges, I literally like all the roles I wear right now. I like all the hats I wear. So it's not like you have to give up. Like if somebody told me I had to give up one of them altogether, it would going to make me a little bit sad, because even though I've scaled back on consulting, for instance, I still do enjoy doing it in a lot of contexts. But I think another thing I should say as part of this discussion is, one of the reasons I have my life set up this way is I learned about myself very early on that I have to diversify or my soul will feel squelched. Because when I started on the clinical path doing the agency work, it was basically 40 hours a week, seeing clients, doing the clinical grind and all of that. And I found that I missed teaching a whole lot, having been an English teacher and having coached kids one-on-one. And I knew I still had that teaching bug in me. So I went to get a PhD, because that's how you teach in this field, or so I thought. And I discovered that I didn't really care for traditional academics too much. And I did a continuing education training course for clinicians at my agency. This was back in 2007. And I had no idea whatsoever that you can get paid to do trainings, that this was a thing in our field. And then a couple of my colleagues really encouraged me, because I do have a performing background. So being up in front of people has never been an issue for me. And that's when I started discovering I probably will never teach in a university. And I've taught online adjunct work. I've done that over the years. And that's something I let go of to save my energetic expenditure, because that's just not where my passion really lied. So with even the jobs or the hats that I have now, there have been times in my evolution that I've had more that I've had just as different opportunities have come up, I've let go of other things. But this whole diversification, if I do just, getting back to my original point, if I do just one thing for 40 hours, I know I can't do it. God bless the people who can. But I know when I was seeing clients for that bulk of time, I would get resentful of spending all that time doing that and not teaching. And I knew if I was just teaching, that would burn me out. Because I can even come back off the road after a major stretch of teaching and feel like I'm so excited to get back in my office and see my clients.
So you had to find, I'm sure it's not just a set point, but you've had to find kind of your range of what your week needs to look like, what your life needs to look like, so that you're actually using those different parts of yourself and each feeds the other.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up that point, different parts of myself, because I know I'm a pretty partsy person in terms of there are different sides of me, different aspects of me. And I have to have some kind of professional situation where all of them feel like they're being fed. But in terms of making the choices, and this is probably something I would say to anybody who is starting a practice or is diversifying or wanting to kind of branch out, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, and I even forgot where I received it, probably from some healer somewhere along the way, that whatever you take on energetically that's new, it's generally a good practice to try to give up something that's of equal energetic value. So, for instance, when I launched into full-time EMDR training, that was when I officially gave up any last online teaching contracts that I had. And so far, the advice has not let me down because I think this bears saying, and once more, it works for me, but I'm not going to say it works for everybody, that I think a lot of us have fears around, money. And if I give this up, am I...
Yeah, if you give it, this is a great topic, Jamie, because it's like, if I see people going through this all the time, like if I give up even like, let's say a day or a few hours of my practice, because there's something else I want to be doing, am I ever going to see that income again? And truly, for most people, they actually have to give it up before the new thing can fully develop. So yeah.
Yeah. So it's a risk. I mean, I'm not going to say it's not a risk. And I will be honest, I had to do my own therapy over this because I'm also a big believer that you got to practice what you preach. And I've still stayed in line with some kind of therapist or healer through all these years for me to receive it. And I remember when I was specifically branching into expanding the training part of the business and knowing I would have to give up even some more clinical hours, like I said, give up some of the online teaching things. And I have struggled with issues around money and prosperity. And a lot of it is deeply seated in old messages or messages from the culture. And I guess I would say to anybody who is tapped in with some kind of therapeutic presence in your life, work on that, because I really do believe that it's a legitimate fear. I mean, I know it's a legitimate fear, yet I also believe very much in energy. And if you're not taking care of yourself energetically, I think it actually thwarts your income potential in the long run.
Mm-hmm. And have you found that's how it's been working for you? That when you were able to give
1,000%.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. 1,000% that taking care of myself has been completely proportional to everything else. And for people who follow my work, the line I get a lot is, Jamie, how do you do it all? You do all this stuff, you all do this stuff. I really do have an ironclad self-care plan, and I deliberately schedule days off. When I was doing my own tax returns last year, I remember even kind of giggling. If people only knew the money I spent on my own therapy and my own healing surfaces, because I've just found that the more I'm able to commit to doing what I need to do, the more energy I have to be more efficient in getting all of this done. And I do work with a lot of therapists in my practice. I have therapists as clients, and that whole idea of energetic burnout and trying too hard, what we might call striving, I think actually can get in the way of productivity.
That sometimes it's not doing more. So I'm really curious about, you've mentioned your team. Mm-hmm. Who was the first person you hired? What was the first role that you hired?
Well, I remember, gosh, wow, this takes me back. It was about 2012, maybe end of 2011, end of 2012. I actually hired my best friend to do some assisting work for me because she was needing to step down to more of a part-time position. And I didn't really have a full-time thing to offer her. And we ended up deciding we couldn't be both friends and work together. So it was fine. And we're still best friends to this day. But it started to help me to realize that having somebody to work for me in an assistant administrative capacity just helps make a lot of the difference. And the money I spent paid for itself. And as the business has grown over the years, last year I was able to hire a full-time operations officer, Mary, who you've been in touch with, who is also an old friend. Yet we're in a really good balance because she is an academic who doesn't like academia. And she's just perfect on so many levels to be running my business. Now, part of why I need somebody full time is because the training component of my business is so vast, and a lot of the role that she manages is keeping all the trainers administratively organized. So within the EMDR training program, for instance, I've sadly lost count of how many faculty we have, and I think about 10 or 11. We have autonomous licenses with my company to be able to run our EMDR training curriculum in their parts of the world or the country mostly. And so I hire a lot of contractors. Mary's my only employee. I call her COO, operations officer, but she's also jokingly my life manager. She also, because it just, having somebody in that full-time capacity allows me more freedom to write. Because part of the reason I knew I had to hire her was I was spending 3 hours a day answering emails.
Yes. Okay. So this is really
like a part-time assistant.
This is really important. So what do you see as the biggest difference between having, working with an administrative assistant and working with an operations manager?
Well, I mean, for me, the biggest difference has been more part-time, the whole part-time, full-time idea that any administrative assistant I had working with me before, because I think I had about 4 of them over the years who just worked with me as they needed part-time work. And they were generally people who were part of my mindfulness community. But with Mary, the big shift has been that she is full-time. And it's not to say I didn't trust my other assistants, but a big part of it was because they were only part-time. They just didn't have a lot of the time and energy to give to really kind of getting a newer organizational structure in place, which is a lot of what Mary has done. And a lot of the role that she has fulfilled is I just know things will get done. I don't have to keep such an oversight on things. And my email volume has been fractioned in terms of what I have to answer or attend to. And that sets up the more time for me to write, which is another big part of what I do. And that seems to always be what goes to the back burner.
Is the writing.
Yeah. And that makes me sad because I love to write. And it's opened up a lot of new amazing opportunities for me to share the work is through the writing. And so it has made me sad when it falls to the back burner. Because the thing about writing, and this may be of an interest to your listeners who are thinking of getting into writing, you rarely see any returns up front for that. Because, I mean, there are some like paid sources that will offer you paid contributions for doing writing, but it's usually very minimal. So a lot of the blogging you might do to get your name out there and just test your skills is just more for exposure. Even when you write a book, a lot of people don't realize this. If you get picked up by a publisher, you may get a small advance, but you're putting a lot of work in with absolutely no guarantee.
Yes.
There's going to be any kind of return. And I mean, I've been very blessed because I've done 7 books now, 5 have been with publishers. And I mean, 4, but one of them is being picked up by a publisher. So, yeah, I mean, and I have seen return on that, no doubt. And the books have allowed a lot of people to reach out to me. One of my favorite stories with that is my book, Trauma and the 12 Steps, which was written in 2012. Steve Danziger, who's now one of my best friends, and I ended up writing a book with him in beginning of 2018 was published. He found me through that book and sent me a message, and he says he stalked me, but it's just networking, as I like to call it. And he's now a trainer for me in my EMDR training program out west. So he kind of runs our West Coast operations with EMDR training. So yeah, with writing, it's not going to pay off up front.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like, do you feel like for you personally, it's paid off financially over time with all the work you've put into it? Okay.
Short answer is definitely yes.
Yeah.
But that takes a lot of faith too.
And time.
Mm-hmm. And I do think that is why writing can get the back burner, because it's not paying off for me right now. But also a lot of the lessons I've had to learn in my own journey is I have to write, because it's really spiritual practice for me too, even in addition to being part of the work that I do.
I'm also seeing, like, for your particular work, it seems like there are these 3 prongs to it, and they all feed each other. So there's your training, your writing, your clinical work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because so much of, and I'm glad you observed that with the 3 prongs, because so much of why I think I'm a good teacher and trainer is because of my clinical experience. And I've taken so much training myself to be able to be a good clinician, and I do the work on myself to do clinician. That informs me as a trainer. And by time I go down to sit and write either an article or a book, It takes time, yes, but it is much more likely to flow out of me because I have spent so much time teaching on it and I've spent so much time practicing it, whether it's in my own life or with clients. And a lot of people do consult with me who are interested in getting into writing, whether it be books or articles or whatever. And I do a lot of feedback review. And one of the biggest things I call out for clinicians who are kind of aspiring to get into writing is it's clear to me you haven't taught this enough, because it's reading more like a technical paper, which if that's how you want to write and you want to be an academic, fine. But if you really want to do more of a clinical or for the public type of writing voice, then you really have to spend a lot of time teaching this. And that's where you develop your voice. And then that, I feel, translates to the page.
Oh, interesting. Hey, it's Annie from the future, just jumping in to tell you about a totally new self-assessment that I've created. I want you to take it and then share your feedback with me because it's new. It's going to help you identify how clear your path to business growth is right now. If you want to grow your impact and your income significantly, this assessment is going to help you see whether you're on a path to do that. It'll tell you whether your path is fairly inevitable to growth or really unlikely or somewhere in between. And of course, it's going to give you insights about where you need to spend time and energy clearing that path so that your growth does become inevitable. To take that self-assessment, it's going to take you like 5 minutes. Go to rebeltherapist.me/score. That's rebeltherapist.me/score. Okay, go take it now, or maybe take it later. And let's get back to our conversation with Jamie. Interesting. What are your writing rituals? Like, how do you fit this into your life when it's going well?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do a lot of my writing on the road when I travel to do trainings. I've written some of my best stuff sitting on the dirty floors of airports just because I'm bored out of my mind and I get an idea that comes. Often it's taking my phone, and if I don't have the computer really handy, and I just write. I'm a pretty avid journaler as well. So as things come up in life, I'll put little shards in the journal that end up in things that I write. And when I go to write a book, it's really a matter of just committing the time to sit down and do it. But know that the process has already been in flow because I have authored the trainings. And again, a lot of those I do when I'm on the road. I realized when I started out writing, I do have to schedule time for it because I've already talked about it can get pushed to the back burner. So I do block off whole writing days. And even this year, I made a deliberate shift that I only am going to see clients and consultees in the afternoon when I'm home so that I have the morning to write.
And is that because writing is kind of morning is prime time for writing for you?
For me, it is. For me, it is. I mean, I say that, but I've also written some great things waking up at 2 a.m. where it's like, I just have to get it out. But part of what I like in my morning ritual is I get up, do my prayers, do my yoga practice, do a little bit of reading. I always read a little bit first thing every morning. And that's regardless of what I'm doing professionally on any given day. And then from that morning ritual, I'm usually in a very good place to write. So, and I found that when I had things scheduled in the morning, I was starting to get resentful of the things I had scheduled because I wanted to have more writing time.
Yes. You were talking about your team, and I want to also talk about how you've hired your trainers. How have you identified those people, and did you grow that slowly or did you grow your team quickly?
Definitely grew it slowly at first. Because there's kind of 2 areas of training that I offer: expressive arts therapy and dancing mindfulness, and then EMDR. So dancing mindfulness has been more organic, more of my soul, more of kind of the thing that feeds me spiritually. And the 2 initial trainers who I kind of licensed to work with me under that model were just 2 very dynamic women who were very impacted by the practice. And I saw they implemented it into their daily life, and they had a passion to share this too. And both of them kind of had this spirit of showing up for anything I did training wise, so that I knew I trusted them to have their own voice with training, but to also kind of keep a mission of what I was wanting to get across with dancing mindfulness and expressive art. So on that end of things, people seem to identify themselves over time by their willingness to kind of come and just like absorb everything we offer in the area of training. And then some people are very clear with me, like I never see myself getting up there actually teaching people, but I may be good doing consulting one-on-one. And there are some people where it's clear that their passion is not in teaching, but it's in building a practice. So a lot of the business savvy that I've gone into building this training company, I know for many people, it's more suited to building a practice and bringing on like-minded people for their practice. Now, on the training end, the EMDR training end of things, another very good friend of mine, she was just my right-hand person through a lot of my EMDR journey. Her name's Amber Stiles Bodnar. She was the maid of honor in my first wedding. Like we go back that far. And when I started training, I knew I wanted her to kind of be my first assistant as I was getting our EMDR training model out. And then it was so super clear she was able to train this herself. And then a lot of people approach me because a little bit of how the EMDR training world works is that we don't have to go through Dr. Shapiro anymore. There's an organization called the EMDR International Association, and you have to put a curriculum through them to get approved. And then if they approve it, you as the training provider are able to do whatever you want in terms of your business, and it's considered an EMDRIA-approved training. So part of the defining feature of our training model is it's a very mindfulness-informed way to train EMDR. So we're training the core protocol, yet we're bringing in a lot more mindfulness-informed interventions related to how you might make decisions in EMDR, related to how you might prepare people for kind of going into the heart of EMDR therapy. So almost anybody who I bring on, I want them to have a mindfulness practice on some level, because that's just so core to how we train it. And a lot of people have approached me, once more having read the books or have heard me speak and knowing that we kind of vibe in terms of our approaches to this. And a couple situations I've recruited people or am recruiting people, because something I would like to see happen with our EMDR training model is I would rather have many trainers who are doing small trainings in their communities and have like a good community feel, as opposed to one trainer who travels all over the world and trains 200 people at any given shot. So it's nice.
What makes you feel like that? I mean, I have a sort of a felt sense of what would make that more effective, but what is it that feels important to you about that?
Community. I really think it's
Real
community.
Okay.
Yeah, to have that ability to follow up with somebody locally who you can see in person for supervision or consultation if you need to continue doing informal networking. Mm-hmm. I do think even though some of our trainings can get large, I think smaller trainings allow for more discussion and more of the community feel. And I just really like that idea of knowing that there's a local presence of a trainer in an area.
What do you do? Because I can imagine it's a different kind of business. Like if you were just trying to be the guru and, everything comes into you, like that would be one business model as opposed to what you're talking about. What do you do differently to kind of encourage those local communities to grow?
It's a great question. And it's interesting you use the word guru, because to me, a true guru allows their students to realize the power in themselves. And that's what I try to do with not just students who come and study with me, but faculty who want to join my program. That yes, I do have some directorship over the content and kind of the vision of things, but there's no greater joy for me than when I see people developing their voice as a teacher. And, two things I'll share about that. The thing that makes me cry more than anything is when I see somebody I've mentored teach. It's an even better feeling for me than seeing a client do well or seeing a student I've taught pick up on something. But when I see one of my faculty members or trainers who've kind of gone through the process with me, when they're able to teach, it's just, this is what it's about, because you pay it forward. And I remember a boss I worked for over the years. This was one of the best pieces of advice I ever got. He's since passed away. He ran kind of the hybrid agency private practice that I worked at. And he said, and this may be useful for your listeners who run a practice, that as the head of a practice, bringing in clinicians, he wants people to feel they have space to develop their passions. Because when they have that space to develop their passions and don't feel micromanaged, they'll be a heck of a lot happier. And it's fundamentally in letting people pursue their passions that they grow. And I know, speaking for myself, I've grown too, not just as a person, but as a business by letting people explore.
Okay. So that's really, I mean, it just sounds like your vision is part of what makes that possible. And then I'm also thinking perhaps also working with Mary, where you're not micromanaging,
Right.
you're providing vision, you're providing that like top level vision, but you're not like getting into the weeds with people.
And that's where Mary, as a weed getting into her, I think has really allowed us to grow and thrive in the last year, which is great because she's a farmer and a gardener as well by kind of avocation. So it's a great metaphor.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Was there ever a scary moment in growing your company or a low moment where you were like, oh shit, how are we going to get through this?
I think it was waiting for the EMDRIA approval to come through to become an EMDR trainer, because I kind of had so much riding on because another part of this with training is how I have grown, and this is a teaching I share freely, is I do what people ask for. People asked me to put together a dancing mindfulness training. People asked me to put a retreat together. People asked me to become an EMDR trainer after I had been training just kind of on general trauma and addiction. And I mean, obviously, if it's something I'm not passionate about, I'm not going to do it. But if there's something where there's enough interest meets the need, I will do it. And so I was just getting so many requests to become a formal EMDR trainer. I knew I had to do it. And I had already had an EMDR book out at that point. And so, yeah, it was a scary moment kind of waiting for the approvals to come through. And I know even when I started in private practice, there was a bit of that scary moment when I was still taking insurance, like waiting for the credentialing to come through, because so much feels like it's riding on what other people are saying. and getting that EMDRIA approval was more nerve-wracking than defending my dissertation. It really was, because there's just so many content things that got audited. And I mean, it's all paid off. And I look back at it now and I laugh. Most of the things that were challenging or trying moments, I can look back now and I laugh. I think like a lot of people who get into independent practice or business, I've always had those moments when I drop something like we talked about. Am I going to make up for it financially? And that's been scary, but I've embraced it as a chance to do the therapeutic work. And so that's my short answer to that. But this is also where I think my practice, my yoga practice, my spiritual practice helps, because if I stay too forced on outcome, I'm not well, and I don't think it translates to the business doing well. So I try to just put one foot in front of the other. I work hard. I mean, I'm a very hard worker, but I also know that if I force it, it doesn't pay off.
So that makes me think of just how, as we were, I mean, a micro scary moment. When we were getting on this call, I had this computer glitch. And so I knew I was like 2 minutes late because I had to restart my computer. Mm-hmm. And I remember even as that was happening, I was like, okay, you can get through this. It's going to be fine. And then you're going to connect with Jamie when you get onto the call together. So I just think there are so many moments in our businesses where we get to lean into our ways of taking care of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. I have a funny story about that, but your story just helped me remember. Probably 2015, about 2015, I was giving a training. It was a 2-day training when I was still doing just kind of general trauma trainings for one of the national companies. And I was at a hotel setting up, and the projector broke that we were running the PowerPoint on. And at the time, we didn't rent them from the hotels because it was too expensive. So you just carried your own projector on site. So my projector broke and everybody started panicking. Like, what are we going to do without a PowerPoint? And I had this moment of, we've educated for 5,000 years without PowerPoint. Why are we freaking out now that there's not a PowerPoint? And it was a trauma and mindfulness course. And well, let's do this without PowerPoint. You have your handouts and it's mostly practice anyway. And it ended up being one of the most engaging, enlightening courses I ever taught, mm-hmm. because people were actually talking to each other instead of being focused and fixated on the screen. So I rarely train on PowerPoint anymore.
Amazing. So it was a great problem.
Yeah.
To have show up. Yeah.
And a lot of these challenges, I feel if you embrace them with breath, end up opening more of a solution.
Right. Yeah. And even in our, in my computer glitch thing, our conversation then started with, me telling you what had just happened. And then that's a moment of connection. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love it. And in expressive arts therapy world, we'd call that process. Being in process constantly and using every little thing that the process reveals in some way.
Beautiful. So I'm just so curious about this. What does a typical day look like for you?
Depends on where I'm at.
Mhm.
When I'm on the road, a typical day looks like I'm training from 8 to 4 or 8 to 4:30.
And
And
in those days, what time do you get up?
if I have an 8 o'clock training start and I'm close to the facility, usually about 6, because I do need grounding time in the morning. When I'm at home, I could take more grounding time. So yeah, when I'm on the road, I train anywhere from like 8 to 4. Usually most places I travel, I know people now in that area. So I'm often spending my evenings connecting with friends, which is a very nice thing. And then when I do a lot of the traveling, as I told you, like in airports, so sometimes, and I listen to what my body needs. Sometimes I need to just do a Amazon or a Netflix binge on the laptop. And other times I do have a lot of ideas flowing and I just do a lot of writing or I do a lot of art. Now, when I'm at home, my days, I think I've given you a little bit of that description where I do take the morning for practice and writing, for my own personal practice and writing. I get up anywhere between 7 and 8 on those mornings typically. I now see my first client at 1,
Mhm.
or consultee call at 1, or interview like this at 1. And I usually try to work 1 to 5, 1 to 6. One evening, I'll go into the evening, pretty late into the evening if I need to. So yeah, that's what things look like for me at home. And then I have some days on my calendar that I've completely blocked for writing or creative process. So that's my short answer.
Yeah, thank you for letting us peek behind the curtain on that.
My pleasure.
Anything else that you want to leave us with about your experience with business and with growing your business to where it is now?
It helps having people who believe in you. For me, that's mostly come in the form of friends and family of choice. And even the two big partnership relationships I've been romantic during the evolution of my business, both of which have ended, both knew that this was like my dharma, this was my path. And and I do think like going forward, because I would like to, and I still have a personal life. It's not like I've let that go totally, because I know some people who have. I know that anybody who I would end up being with has to kind of be behind this 100%. Because I do feel sorrow in my heart for people I've met and people who I've talked to who don't have supportive partners. And even the partners I've had through this journey have been supportive in their own way. And it was a lot of other reasons that caused the relationship to end. But leaning into that support, I think, is incredibly helpful, and surround yourself with the people who believe in you. I'm so grateful. Every day I kind of shudder with gratitude at the friends I have in my life, the recovery support system I have in my life, who cheerleads me every step of this way. Yet they're also the ones who can tell me, take a breath, like take a day off. But maybe you're pushing this a little too hard. So I'm grateful for that presence in my life too.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you so much for your time, Jamie. This has been incredible.
My pleasure. This is fun because I get asked these questions a lot, and a lot of people are afraid to ask them. So this is nice to have this out there. And I can't guarantee that my process is going to connect with you and what your needs or goals are. But if anything I've said has been useful, feel free to take it and run with it.
Well, and let me tell you, it's like getting really specific stories like yours about this is what actually worked for me, I think is so much more powerful than just kind of like blanket advice about like, here's how you grow a business, here's what you do, because the same thing does not work for everyone. So I find it really profound to get to hear a story like yours. And I think that that's true for my listeners. I know it's true for my listeners that they get to hear a story like yours told in a really personal, real way. And they get to see like, oh, this part of it is totally true for me. No one's ever said that before. So yeah, it's very valuable. Thank you so much, Jamie.
My pleasure.
Find out more about Jamie Marich at traumamadesimple.com. If you listen to Rebel Therapist because you love the idea of expanding your business beyond the therapy room and increasing your impact and your income, you probably know that you're going to need some help with that. I have an amazing program to help you figure out what your unique business will look like and how to actually build it so that it's high quality and profitable. It's the Rebel Therapist 2-Day. And it is awesome. If you want to level up beyond the therapy room, you really should join us. We've still got a few spots in our 2-Day on August 29th and 30th, 2019. That's a Thursday and a Friday. And it's not full days. The days are about 4.5 hours each. You know you can't really do this alone, and it's really fun and transformative to do it with a small community of rebels. I'm capping this particular group off in August at just 6 people. So it's nice and intimate, and you will get my help. Go to rebeltherapist.me and click on Rebel Therapist 2-Day. So that's rebeltherapist.me, not .com, rebeltherapist.me, and I will see you next week. That was so much fun, and it just flew by. I was like, what? It's 10:45?